Hello, unstoppable real estate investors. I'm Rihanna Starr, and joining me today for our member spotlight is a client of mine, Andrew Castine of Mitten Property Solutions. And Andrew and I have been working together for about 2 years, Drew?
Over 2 years, yep.
And he started from, well, I'll let him tell his story, but Fridays, I want to let everybody know we have 2 episodes of a podcast every week. On Fridays, it's a member spotlight. So if you're a member of this group, Unstoppable Real Estate Investor, or you're watching this in another real estate investment group, and you'd like to join us in the Unstoppable Real Estate Investor, I'll add the link to our group up above after we're done. Every Friday at noon Eastern, I do a member spotlight of someone in my group. So please feel free to join us. And if you're in the group and you'd like a little more exposure and you'd like to, and you're a little shy about promoting yourself, this is a great way to do it. It's also a great way for everyone to get to know each other better through just these conversations. If you're joining us for the podcast today, please let us know in the comments that you're here, and feel free to ask any questions, make comments. I'm going to the group right now on my phone so that I can track it and respond to questions if you have any while Andrew and I are chatting. Here we are. Okay. So let us know you're with us. And looks like Ryan Johnson's watching. Ryan Johnson, yay, you're going to be one of my guests soon. And all right, Andrew has a really awesome story. You know, he's just a normal guy. Well, he's a really smart, normal guy. And he's a family man. And here's the thing. Andrew puts his family first. They go in his schedule first, and he schedules his business around them. He's living a very balanced life. He's not killing himself. He works hard. But what Andrew has that a lot of other real estate investors don't have is he has that entrepreneurial mindset, and he's very analytical. He has a CPA background. So he and I have worked for 2 years. Whenever we have dealt with a problem like contractors or finding lenders or whatever, we build a process around it. And then he really goes to town and he refines that process. I mean, he could sell those processes in a little box because he really refines them well. So Andrew is a very good person to listen to when it comes to how to really make your real estate investment business a business, not a side hustle or a hobby. You have to approach it like a business, which means you've got to implement processes and systems. So a book that really I highly recommend everyone read at least once a year is Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited, because Michael Gerber talks about this thing in the book. It's the main focus of the book. And we all have 3 roles we play in our business. You're the technician or the worker bee, you're the manager or the person who's like hiring and training and building the processes and systems. And then you have the entrepreneur who's the visionary, who's keeping the worker bee and the manager busy and employed. So Andrew has been able to vacillate between all 3 of those roles brilliantly, in my opinion. And so Andrew, I want to just have you share, and I know I've interviewed you before, but talk about when we met, where you were at, because you weren't doing any real estate investing. Let's talk about the business you had to sell first and what was going on there, and transition into how you got into real estate investing.
Yeah, so I really got into real estate investing through just kind of like it's family motivated, right? So my background, I'm a CPA by trade. I had worked in public accounting, 6+ years. And while I was doing that, my wife went to dental school. She got her degree in dentistry, and we moved to Northern Michigan. And she had an opportunity to purchase a dental practice from a retiring doc. And I said, hey, this looks like a good opportunity. I can stop doing public accounting. I can, work 4 days a week in northern Michigan, spend more time with the family, stop traveling. I was traveling a ton. We had our oldest was 5 months old at the time. So I said, hey, yeah, let's go for it. And we jumped in together, and I ran the front office, the patient scheduling, and the team. And my wife did all the hard work and the actual dentistry in the back. So when we had gone through that process, sure, it was really cool and fun to like take over a business and then grow it and continue to build on what was already there. But what I figured out was, to a certain extent, you can only negotiate insurance contracts so much, maximize reimbursement so much, schedule so much, but we didn't make money as a family unless my wife was doing dentistry, trading her time for dollars. So that's where I really got into, what other creative things could I do to just generate some income. So I did some accounting, consulting stuff. It was the same, trading your time for dollars. And so I stumbled into real estate. I just watched a webinar, and I was like, oh, it was going through the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff. And I was like, yeah, mathematically, that makes sense. As a rational accountant, you go out and acquire assets that passively pay you income to cover your expenses, and you get your time back. Yeah, I think I'll do that. So,
and that's when you joined Fortune Builders?
Right. Yeah. It was really just, getting an understanding of, if I get into the nuts and bolts of it and can learn it at a high level, that I'm sure I'm going to be successful at it. So right when I got in to the real estate investing game, that was right before the pandemic hit. So once the pandemic hit, we had a hard stop on everything dental related. And I spent all of my time looking at real estate investments. So ended up picking up a couple of rentals, in the middle of the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we had a, soul searching process and timeline as a family. And we didn't see, had two small kids at the time. My wife was working like a dog. She was doing 50 hours a week on a 4-day work week. And we wanted to keep growing our family. And we didn't see a way to continue doing that with the life that we were living. So we just figured out the best way to do that was to transition out of the dental practice. And the way to do that was to eventually sell it. So that's when we ended up getting connected, was, in the fall of 2020, when my wife's a couple months pregnant. She's got a hard stop of April 2021 because there's a baby coming. And
no prospects in sight,
nobody interested in buying it.
Yeah, and I wasn't coaching you on real estate at the time.
Right.
I was coaching you on selling your dental practice.
Yeah. So we
and this was really his motivation on this was happy wife, happy life. She was not happy. And that was affecting him because he's a good guy, and he wants to be a good provider, and his wife's grinding away. He was really the business owner, and she was the technician. She was the worker bee, and she hated it. And he had to hear her, just the negativity and she was miserable. And so it was also, he wanted to be in real estate investing, but also the immediate problem was, I need to make my wife happy, and I need to get this problem solved.
Yeah, and that's what.
How long did it take us to get it sold? Because by the time we sold it, we had 3 interested people.
Yeah,
and I think we got it sold in 4 or 5 months. Was it?
It was about 6 to 7. Yeah, because just timelines line up. We had it under contract within 90 days. But the whole transition process took 6 to 7 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So it happened pretty quickly, and then he was able to give all his attention to real estate. So talk about the schoolhouse project.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because look, there is
Yeah.
Every project brings you value. Every project. What was the big lesson you learned about yourself on the schoolhouse project? I don't want to do rehabs.
15 different things. I don't know.
Yeah. So talk about the schoolhouse project.
The schoolhouse is
and how it started.
Historical schoolhouse that we purchased. It was the first rental we bought up here in northern Michigan. It is the historical schoolhouse in Torch Lake, built in 1880. So it's all
right. Wait, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Ryan Johnson, Christine Delgado, Brandon Dukes, Quan Lindrith. I always love seeing you, Quan. Rodney Senior, Michael Valdez. Hey, Mike, good to see you. All right, so he buys this cool property with all kinds of potential. 1880 it was built.
1880, yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we were short-term renting it because it had a special use permit with the township, and it was doing pretty well. But there are a lot of things that needed to be updated. You know, it used to be an antique shop, it used to be a kayak rental shop. So we said, all right, let's shut it down, and while we're not renting it over the winter, let's do a big renovation. And it had all these plans set up, got workers out there ready to go. Started demolishing it, and then realized that, hey, you know, none of our workers pulled permits on anything. And, you know, for me, being my first time, I wasn't aware that whatever the scope of work that they were doing required certain permits. So now we're having conversations with the county and the building department and making sure we're going through all the proper channels and getting blueprints drawn and working with an architect, and, you know, having this whole process, and it starts snowballing down. And then, you know, in any area, skilled labor is hard to come by. In northern Michigan, the population's a fraction what it is in a metro area. So the people available to help and work on that just was few and far between to find reliable work. So we ended up, you know, over the next several months, worked through all the planning process with the county and everything. And then when it finally got time to work, there was nobody able to take on a project that size. So it took time to find the right person.
Let's pause there for a minute. He had two guys tinkering away at it. And this was a soft skill lesson for Andrew, because Andrew is type A, but he's a nice guy. And he was, one of the lessons he learned on this project is to be assertive. And he had like an electronic lock. So whenever he had Sam and Sean, and he had Sam was really the main guy. And every time he would come and go, Andrew knew it. And he also knew the guy was lying, because the guy would lie about how much work he had done that day, when he had been there.
Yeah,
and it was just getting to be very frustrating, because, and then Sean was gone because he was either doing his other business or whatever. And they just weren't contractors. They were just, and they weren't doing the work. And so this project was dragging on, and it was getting more and more frustrated. And then there were permitting issues that were coming up that were
really their lack of knowledge on that
further
whole process
into the project.
Caused a 50% delay in the whole timeline of the project. So it just kind of snowballed everything. But by the time we got the right person in there, it still took another 3 months to get the job done, start to finish, but we got it all done and approved and everything. And now it's, you know, this cute little boutique fancy rental.
Yeah, and it's got a large section, a small section, so it can be two rentals, and it's a historical building and stuff. And let's like look back on that. If you had to do that all over again, what would you do differently?
Oh, a million things. Probably statistically, looking at the numbers, I wouldn't do it, because I blew my budget out of the water. You know, the only benefit is that I'm keeping it, and it's going to definitely pay for itself, you know, years and years down the line. But I was renting it just fine. I didn't need to do major renovations. Like, sure, yeah, we did a lot of things that make it look really nice, but we over rehab.
Were they necessary? Yeah, you gold plated that rehab. And that's a term, if some of you are new, that means you over rehab it. A lot of newer investors think that when you rehab a property, you have to make it perfect. That is not true. In fact, there are 4 rules for rehab. What are they?
Is it necessary? Is it going to sell the house? Does it add value? And is it cost effective?
And what would you say? All 4 of those were blown to bits on
this. Is it
this?
going to help rent the house? Is it necessary? Yeah. A lot of it was no. Some of it was like the bedrooms didn't go all the way, the walls didn't go all the way to the ceiling. So they were just like partitioned little rooms. So like when people would sleep, you know, you could hear what was going on and everything. It wasn't really 2 true bedrooms. So we
would say that was necessary.
Kind of. Didn't have to do that. But you know, cost effective, definitely not. Add value, definitely yes. Would it help sell or rent the house? Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's
What are other
two and a half
lessons?
of those four, you know.
Yeah. What else did you learn? Like even like the obvious things, but just personal growth wise and mindset wise and just in going forward, what were things you learned and decisions you made because of that project?
Oh, I think a lot of it's about, me knowing about myself is, being decisive in the moment on things and getting an understanding of what needs to be happening. I'm a very, very much a doer, from my life in public accounting. It's like, you're helping, interns or staff learn how to do things, and, you can help them along the way, and you want them to learn and grow. But at the end of the day, like, it's still got to get done. So in my former life, I would sometimes just pick it up and get it done. So when I can't do contracting work and I don't have capable people doing it, I got to make the decision as soon as I recognize it to make a switch, because it's going to cost me more in the long run.
Good. What else? Anything else that that comes to mind about what you learned? Like from the entrepreneur role, what did you learn about working on the business versus in the business with that? What were things you took from that lessons, like, for example, with contractors and things?
Yeah, I think a lot of, on the business versus in the business, I was doing way too much in the business through that whole process. I was running doors, loading up my car and running doors out to the property, and just all these different kinds of things where I was just making concessions because I wasn't getting the fit that I was looking for. And, it's kind of that done's better than perfect, or like
You were the
fast is,
errand boy because
yeah,
the
right.
people you hired weren't cutting it. Yeah.
Right. And then having the wrong person in place, there were so many missed opportunities that I had, because I was doing things like wasting a whole day going to the store, picking up doors, driving them an hour out to the site, and driving home. The next thing you know, it's like time to pick up the kids from school. Like, that was a well spent day. So,
Talk about that. Talk about, because I really admire and appreciate that your family comes first. So talk a little bit about that, because I think when people get into real estate investing, especially if it's a side hustle and they're working a full-time job, that, they don't feel like you get a lot of excuses from people that they don't have the time to do this. And, so talk a little bit about how you prioritized, and then we'll move on to accountability, because I know that's a big piece for you.
yeah,
So talk
like,
about the prioritizing of your family
I
first.
mean, it's just a core value. It's like everything we do. It's the whole reason why we sold a $1 million business. It's, why we decided to have more children. It's, why we put our kids in the school we put them in. Why, my wife retired from dentistry when the same week my daughter was born 18 months ago, because that's what's important to us. Because, like, you can chase money all you want, you trade your time for dollars, but what good is it if you don't have the right people in your life to enjoy it with? So
Yeah, the
it's
quality
just,
of life.
yeah,
And
that's
where are
just
the
been
kids going to school?
just a Montessori school in town that, really helps them grow and independently learn and develop. And they're smart kids. So they're just, doing this, that, and the other thing. We had parents day on Monday. So Ariel and I went, and we were there for an hour hanging out with Alex and Charlie, just doing work, doing games and Montessori things and puzzles and baking bread and, putting things
How
into
fun.
cups, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So now, and he did all of this during the pandemic. So that was that first project.
Mhm.
And what was a decision you made as a result of that schoolhouse project about your business and what kind of exit strategies you wanted to do going forward?
Well, once we sold the dental practice, it was just a foregone conclusion. I was just going to go full time into real estate, like, duh. So while we were closing the dental practice, I got a flip under contract, had that done. We closed that in 98 days, closed the close April to June, and no, July, but whatever. And then right after that, we got another flip under contract and closed that June to September, 91 days.
Yeah,
And
and how many flips have you done total?
those two.
Why? Tell us why.
Because when I got through the process, the first one was good. I was working with a contractor and we got to the end of the
Well, the
project.
schoolhouse was your first flip.
Sure, it wasn't like I still own it, so it was more of
Yeah.
a fixed to rent.
It was a
But
burr. Yeah.
yeah, so
Burr, for those of you who are new, is you buy, you
renovate,
rehab, you renovate.
yeah,
Yeah. You buy,
renovate,
you
rent,
renovate,
refinance,
rent, and refinance.
yeah, and then repeat it.
Yeah.
So
Say
yeah,
more about why you aren't a big fan of fix and flips,
yeah,
rehab.
project flip, flip number one, project two, had all the paperwork in place with the contractor, had a fixed fee contract, and we got to the end of the project and he said I owed him like an extra $10,000. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. It's a fixed fee contract, and he would, threaten to lien up the property and contractor, liens and things like that. And I said, okay, I'm calling my attorney and we can hash it out, because here's this contract here. You're saying you're owed more. That's fine. We'll just talk about it. And then he realized 15 minutes later he was in the wrong. He signed his unconditional waiver of lien and took his final check. So that was a lot of stress to go through. And then
Yeah,
the
I
last
remember
flip I
that.
did, I wasn't taking that crap anymore. So I broke that flip down into different segments. I said, okay, I need somebody to do demo. If you do a good job on demo, you can get another task and you can do the flooring. If you do a good job on the flooring, you can get the siding job.
Yeah, you made it more incentive based. You weren't
I
so
didn't have,
generous. You
there was only
stayed
one
on
person
them.
out of 8 tasks. There's only one person who got a second task and he didn't get a third, because I just wasn't getting that consistent level of performance. Now it's just like, all right, here's your check for the demo. Bye. Thank you for that. And I realized during that project that, man, I'm burning through all these people. In the middle of it, I figured out that, I did such a great job negotiating this contract. It needs a lot of rehab. I'm going to sell it. I made decent money on it. But about halfway through, I met with a local investor. He's like, oh yeah, I invest with my buddies, and my one buddy's a GC and my other buddy's an electrician, and we meet up on the weekend and do the work ourselves, so we control all the labor costs, so we're only in for like the materials. I'm like, crap, I could have wholesaled this to this guy for like 20 grand, and he would have been in for 40 grand less than what I paid on the rehab, and I would have had my check up front, and he would have had a good investment at the end of the day, and we would have expanded the pie. So I said, all right, that makes more sense to me. If I can focus on the numbers, the analysis, my forte, deal construction, and do that at a greater volume and focus more on the wholesaling, acquiring it up front, and then letting somebody else take on the meat and potatoes of doing the whole renovation process. That's what I want to do. So just about a year ago, started that process, developed out a system, and have been doing heavy direct to seller messaging to do more deals. Basically getting to 2 a month right now and trying to get that up to 1 a week.
And what would you say your superpowers are, and where you need to operate so you're in your zone of genius?
Numbers for sure. Basically
going more into detail, like deal construction, creative financing.
Yeah. So if you think of a deal,
detail
depending on what someone's situation is and how much they're willing to pay, you kind of start at like, this is a flippable property. Like they want 50 for it. It needs 50 and it's worth 200. Well, okay, so there's that level. That makes sense. Everybody can eat there. Well, the next layer is like, they want 90 and it needs 50 and it's worth 200. Okay, well, that's probably not a flippable property, but it probably would cash flow as a rental after you get all the work done. Okay, then from there, now they want 150 or 120, but it needs 50 and it's worth 200. And now it's not going to cash flow as a rental, but if you can creatively structure that deal where you can have some type of seller financing or subject to, that's really big right now because interest rates are twice what they were 6 months ago. You can have a seller finance deal in there where the seller's carrying some of that cost, and it allows you to hold it as a rental and cash flow it on top of that. And then the top layer is like a wrap deal where you structure the whole deal, and then you have another end buyer who's like a penalty box buyer or something like that, where somebody doesn't have to qualify in the traditional sense for a mortgage, but they can still cover that monthly payment similar to a rental. But now, as on on the wrap layer, you're not carrying the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. You're actually truly selling it to somebody else, and
All right,
it's their
so
responsibility.
define some of these terms for people that aren't as familiar with creative financing.
Yeah,
So
so super high level,
explain
super
wrap.
simple. Yeah, I'll start at the bottom. So subject to, I'm gonna buy your house, subject to your mortgage. I'm gonna give you, give me the deed and I'll take over your mortgage. We're gonna keep your mortgage in place. I'm gonna keep paying for it, and all the paperwork's in there to keep us both protected along the way.
All
That's
right,
subject to.
pause there. That is the easiest, fastest way to get into a deal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Another layer
Then
of
there's
that,
seller
is seller
financing.
financing. If there's no mortgage or a mortgage on some and then some on the other, you can hybrid those together.
This
Seller
now
financing.
this works great when there's a lot of equity, because then it's still a good deal for the seller. Unless they're a seller that needs to really cash out and get a big chunk of change. But there
Right.
are sellers that are willing to do that when, especially it's how you present that. If they see, like there was one that you had where they really liked the idea of this monthly income
Yeah.
coming in.
Had
They
a ton of
liked that.
success
That
with,
made more sense to them than a big chunk. They wanted, so go ahead.
yeah, had a ton of success with tired landlords recently. They, owned a rental property 20 plus years. It's cash flowing every month, but boy, are they sick of getting out there and, fixing a leaky faucet or, patching a roof or something like that that's going on. So with the seller financing structure, they're able to still collect that monthly check and return on that investment, but now they're totally removed from the property. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to deal with any of the tenants. They don't have to do any of the maintenance. So I'm taking all that over. And usually in those type of situations, the landlord, very often, if I got somebody in there and they're doing well, I don't need to raise the rents, and I'm totally cool with that. And then there's opportunity where there's a margin between what people are paying right now and what the market rate is. I love to keep people in there if possible. So, we'll have a modest increase to get closer to that, but I don't need to, take somebody from 600 a month to 1,500 a month, right off the bat.
Yeah, and one thing that you've been great about is keeping existing tenants in there. Like you bought some properties where tenants have been in there for 15 or 20 years. Because you haven't been greedy. You've gone in there and let them know, look, you're going to get a rent increase. And you've even rent to buy with like a couple of tenants too.
A lease option.
Yeah.
So it's just
so what else? Now explain. I don't recall you ever doing any novations, but you do a lot of wraps. So talk about what a wrap is.
So wraps
in layman's
really,
terms. Don't get all CPA accountant.
So let's say, nuts and bolts, you got the subject to, you got the seller finance, you know what those are. You can kind of take either both of those and hybrid together, like 50% mortgage, 50% seller finance or something like that. So that you're paying both of those, you're paying the mortgage, you're paying the seller financing note. Now you take both of those and wrap it all together in one bundle, and then you create a new overarching note over that entire process. You take that note and you go and you sell it to an end buyer who's going to live in that property. That's it.
All right. So give an example of that. Like walk us through one of yours. So people, because that's
I had
conceptual.
A situation where,
so make it practical and
I
understandable.
was purchasing a home from a landlord for $95,000, and the seller had a mortgage for $60,000, and we did seller finance on the remaining $35,000. So between the two, I'm paying about $700 a month.
So did you do subject to and
seller finance? Yep.
Okay.
So then turned around and I sold that property to the tenant who had been there, 5 years, wanted to buy the house, and we put the nuts and bolts together. The property was worth about 110 at the time. So we put a contract together for 110, financed it on a 30-year term at 2 points above market. And the payment ended up being $800 a month, which is pretty much what he was paying for rent. So the rent stayed the same for the tenant, but now they're buying the house.
It's a mortgage.
Right. Yeah. So I'm paying.
And what did you net on that?
So I'm paying the note $500, I'm paying the seller $200, and I'm receiving $800. So I'm making $100 a month in spread between those two.
So
And then
you
I'm
were the
selling it
bank
for
pretty much.
95. Yeah, I'm selling it for 90, or I'm buying it for 95 on the one side, and then I'm selling it for 110 on the other. So that's a spread of about 15,000 there in between. So then as time goes on, the mortgage gets paid down, the seller note gets paid down, and then the buyer's note gets paid down slowly over a 30-year period. So at the end of 13 years, when that primary mortgage is paid off, I will have zero that I owe between the mortgage and the seller, but I'll still be collecting $800 a month from the tenant, and I'll have about $60,000 in built up equity in the property still from the principal balance they'll owe on that wrapped note.
Okay. So what else? What, so you made a decision, I don't, doesn't make sense for me to do the rehabs. I'm going to wholesale.
Yeah.
Now talk about a little bit about that process, and then we'll, start easing into the finish line here of what, in your opinion, is the main reason for your success with regard to how you're getting deals?
I don't know.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Right? So look,
yeah, obviously.
you've got to spend money and time on marketing. And if you're not going to spend money, you've got to spend a lot of time, and you've got to be consistent.
That's
Talk
where I
about
was.
your marketing. Talk about your marketing
So
routine,
I'm coming up on,
and how you've refined your marketing process.
Yeah, I'm coming up on 3 years into real estate investing. So getting ready to crush that 95% percentage, get out of that.
You're already
bucket.
there, dude.
Oh,
And what he's
95% of people
referring to there is 95% of all real estate investors fail. So there's a very small percentage. This is not an easy business. It's not a get rich quick business. It is a complicated business with a lot of options to it. And it's also creative there, but this is a business you can't do by yourself. You've got to know how to network and build relationships and collaborate. There are a lot of exit strategies. There are a lot and the people that succeed at this are people who get how important processes and systems are. And the two biggest processes or systems that are essential for you to succeed in this business is a good backbone, central nervous system, brain and backbone operations. Your operational systems, what keeps the business running, the budgeting, the scheduling, the project management, what keeps you moving every day in the business. And then your marketing system, which is really your cardiovascular system of your business, the heart and lungs pumping the blood through the whole organism. So talk a little bit about that, because that's something where you and I are strong, especially together, but why our coaching relationship, well, first talk about operations and marketing, and then we'll talk a little bit about why our coaching relationship has been so successful. And then we'll wrap up with your rooftop message. Sound good?
For sure. So I'm coming up on 3 years into real estate investing. The first 2 years were all like referral based marketing. I joined a local BNI chapter. I went every single week, and that's where I got my deals. My first flip came through a pocket listing.
For a while.
Yes. Yeah. The first 2 years, every time I was doing a deal, it came through a referral. I bought the schoolhouse through a referral through an agent. That's just kind of how it snowballed. And when I sat back and looked and I said, okay, cool, I'm pumping a lot of time and effort into marketing myself through this network. If I want to pivot and get out of doing one flip a quarter, which wasn't going to cut it for us to have a full-time job to sustain the family, I need to pivot into doing more deals on a wholesale basis. And I can't go out and pound the pavement and market and network and do 2, 3, 4 deals a month. I got to put some investment in reaching more people and getting in touch with them. So that's where it made sense for me to, go full scale,
ramp up the marketing.
Yeah. Into the marketing and get that bloodline going. And we're we're 12 months, just about 12 months in now. And, I have 768 leads that are on drip, people that I've talked to in the last 12 months that are, not quite ready to sell yet, but leads that I've acquired over time and already talked with them and preloaded that conversation. And I'm waiting for those to eventually hit in some capacity.
And talk about your marketing process, because and he works with Christian Weatherspoon and Chris Steele of Real Estate Made Easy, who are real estate investors, but they also provide marketing services to real estate investors. And talk about what that process has been like, because it's like a turnkey marketing system. But Andrew, one of his superpowers is refining to make a process or system even more efficient, where he's even gone back to Christian and Chris and said, hey, this is how I'm making your system better. And they've been awesome. Like, they're always looking at ways to refine. And Christian's the back end technical running things guy. And then Chris is brilliant at negotiating and talking to sellers and the selling piece. And Andrew's developed quite a relationship with them, but I think he's helped improve their business just as much as his own. And so talk about like what your daily and weekly routine is like for marketing.
So
like make it real,
back
get
to
detailed about
the life
that.
of an accountant, right? An accountant's job, in public accounting, you're doing an audit on this client and you want to look at what we did last year and did we meet our budget? Did we get paid for the services that we performed? Can we improve what we're doing? Can we do it more efficiently? And in public accounting, I was one of the firm-wide assurance technology trainers. I taught people 0 to 5 years across the firm on how to do audits more efficiently. So it's really ingrained in my system to constantly evaluate and track and see where the numbers are and adjust accordingly from there. So, I keep a KPIs log that shows me every day what we did for, offers, phone calls out the door, new leads in the pipeline. And then anything that's going stale, anything that's turning from a green light to a yellow to a red or something like that, that we need to check up on and make sure that we're always keeping tabs on that. So then we can see the trends over time of where things are going. And it really comes down to just making those adjustments and tweaks to see what the results are. It's all testing and measuring, it's like being a good scientist. Once you have the data there, you can do something with it. And we actually made the summertime got slow because in Michigan, when the sun's out in the north, everybody wants to go out and play. So people aren't really super interested in selling their house. So the numbers went down in the summer. Okay, let's test and measure and tweak and go from there. And they picked back up in September. As soon as Labor Day hit, everybody wanted to sell their house again. And now it's back down again in October because we're fighting interest rates and all that.
Talk about the actual day-to-day process that you go through.
Oh, me? Yeah. So I will, I'll jump in, and my first thing to do is like any new lead that comes in through the portal. So backing up a little bit, the whole process is we have a streamlined system to pull data, skip trace those numbers, and use virtual assistants to text message.
And you guys are using batch leads, right, to pull your data, to pull your list.
Property radar
To pull your lists and then skip trace them.
Yep.
Okay.
And then so that we send texts out in batch, and the VAs have conversations with those people, and anything warm gets kicked into my pipeline. So that's where I pick it up from there. So the first thing I'm doing is calling anybody new in the pipeline and
calling the qualified sellers that are motivated.
Yep. So I call them, and you could get a wide variety of like, I need to sell right now, all the way to, hey, I was just looking for an offer. What do you think it's worth, type of thing.
But the main thing is a texting campaign, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So that's the initial setup. Is anybody new, call them and get an understanding of where they are, what's their ideal timeline. Do you have a true why to sell? And just kind of go from there. Like, there's no point in talking about price if you don't have the first two. So, yeah, I'm super motivated, but I'm not ready to sell for the next 2 to 3 months. Well, let's talk 2 to 3 months, because
they're not super motivated, because a motivated seller is someone who wants to sell fast within the next 30 days. And
so
they're
that's
willing
the
to
big thing
negotiate
is,
on price.
initial conversations with the new leads that come in, and then we go straight to the responses. People are constantly responding, getting back to us, on drip campaigns, on phone calls, on texts that we're sending. So make sure that those all are reviewed. And then we have a really, really simplified pipelines. We have deals that we're analyzing to look at the numbers to make sure if they make sense, appointments that we're setting to go walk those properties, offers that we've made and we're negotiating, properties we have under contract that we're now actively wholesaling. And then you got to have the end too, because once it's under contract and it's assigned, you got to monitor it to close to make sure everybody's coming to the finish line and performing on it. So it's really just a simple 5-bucket pipeline and just managing the whole process throughout.
Yeah. And what's the key to succeeding as a wholesaler?
Consistency. Totally. You got to be in there every day. Like
and what's the end? What is the end of a wholesale deal?
Oh, a check.
A buyer.
A buyer's fine.
Yeah,
but
and
yeah,
when we
the
talk
check in the
about
middle.
reverse wholesaling, what reverse wholesaling is you're shopping for a buyer you already have.
Yeah.
And so Andrew's got like a main buyer, but you've picked up a couple of other buyers recently.
Yeah, I probably have a good 8 to 10. I mean, I've been doing this for a year. I have 8 to 10 buyers. You don't need 100 people on your buyers list. 90% of them are tire kickers.
And the reason that works for him is he has relationships with these buyers. Building your buyers list isn't about going into real estate Facebook groups and going on a LinkedIn and just grabbing names and sticking them on a list. That is not a buyer's list. A buyer's list is people that you have built a relationship with. You. They know about you. You have some kind of contact and communication with them. Or if you are building a list and you're at least you've created an email drip campaign for them. There's some kind of communication and interaction on your part where you have like connected with that person, because you're going to be much more successful as a wholesaler if you do that, because now it's real. You're not some Joe Schmo wholesaler like everybody else. They're looking forward to hearing from you. Oh, Andrew's got a deal. Yeah. Well,
yeah. Part of that comes with my, very direct personality. Like I'm calling people with a purpose and intention. Like, oh yeah, hey, here, we got this deal. Let's talk about it. Is it something that you're interested in?
Yeah. And he's confident about that because he's got experience, because he's mastered his craft through consistency and practice, and he's been driven, and his motivation is his family. He's got a big, hairy ass why. And so let's talk about do you think you could have done this all by yourself eventually?
Eventually, yeah, many years down the road.
From your point of view, let's talk about our relationship, like what it does for you, how it helps you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, like I've in the past, when I used to drive an hour one way to and from work, I would spend a lot of my time in the mornings on accountability calls with local professionals in the real estate space. And we would talk about, what we're working on, same 4 questions. What are you working on today? How was yesterday? What issues do we identify that we can overcome, and how can I help you? So just really picking each other up on a daily basis. And that was fine. But
and how many accountability calls did you have at one point? I remember seeing your calendar, and he scheduled these 15-minute, and every
6
day
in a row, every 15 minutes.
He'd have accountability calls.
Yeah.
And then what started to happen with those? People started drifting, and yet Andrew
make a phone call at 8:15 and nobody answers the phone. All right,
accountability.
Wait until the next one at 8:30.
Right. Accountability. You either have a love-hate relationship with that, because you're thinking, oh, accountability, oh my God, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and boy, what if I don't do it right or whatever. But the way I look at accountability, and let me know if you agree with this, Andrew, is it's support. It's support in helping you follow through and do what you say you're going to do and keep on track. That supports you being consistent. Would you agree with that?
I would add to that it's also a component of challenge too. You gotta, like, sure, it's great to have somebody supporting
Yeah,
you,
you
but
got to
you really
rise to the
have that
occasion because you care what they
person
think. Right.
balancing off. Yeah, I remember, we used to, one of my buddies in BNI, we used to chat and talk about like what we're gonna do that day. And we I remember telling him like, oh shit, it's 2 o'clock and I gotta get this done. Otherwise I had to tell Tony I didn't do it tomorrow. you know.
So
So
what's the difference between accountability buddies and having a coach? Specifically me, we've had a relationship for 2 years and he now doesn't even, it used to be that clients would renew every 6 months. Now he's renewing every
on
year.
the
And now
lifetime
we've even
plan.
gotten a point where he's like, I'm not going to be renewing every year. And he's referred me a lot of clients. So I give him discounts for that. I like, we've built a relationship and now we're about to do a project together. And I was laughing last week because it was renewal time. And I said, all right, look, well, why don't we just start renewing on an annual basis until whenever you're not getting value from our relationship? And he goes, when you die.
Yeah, right. Because you're going to die before me. I'm just too young.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a little young whippersnapper. So talk a little bit about specifically why you would recommend someone have a coach.
Yeah, I think yeah, like accountability buddy's fine, but that person's like, they got their own stuff that they're dealing with in their business and they're working through it. Like a coach is somebody who's, in your stuff and like understands your business and like what you're going through and all that, and then has it, you've said it before.
They're
It's like
going
a
to call
sounding
you
board.
out. Yeah, they're going to,
It's
and they have an invested interest in you following through and holding you accountable
right,
and doing what's going to get you results.
right. Yeah, I think that's what's really powerful for me because I am a very driven person and I have huge goals and I'm always going to strive to go out there and get them. But I went through the whole life of dental practice at 3.5 years of my time doing that, without a coach, without anybody to work, and it was just trial and error for 3 years to learn how to do the dental profession. And looking back, if I had, somebody guiding me and helping me throughout the process, I would have made life a million times easier. Wouldn't have burned out my wife in 2 years or whatever it was, and would have made the process a lot easier. But really for me, taking my goals and trying to level them up on a constant basis. Here they are on my big board, looking at them all the time. But it's just ticking that box, checking in on a weekly basis to see what's going on and what's the next level up from there. And, for me, recently I've been really tired, it's just about, man, I feel like I'm lacking on the motivation or something like that. No, I'm just working way
And
too
having
hard.
someone you can check in with that says, look, no, you're not being a lazy ass. You've been grinding away for 2 years. You're tired. Allow yourself to be tired. What do we want to do around that? How do we work around tired without it stopping everything? And it's, we refined your schedule. It's like, all right, look, you've worked hard enough. How about Fridays? You just half day and it's just administrative stuff,
Right.
And when you're tired, take a break. This isn't about killing yourself.
Mhm.
If you're consistent and you do the revenue generating activities of marketing, networking, and making offers, and you do that consistently, it isn't as hard. There's a grind aspect to it, but it's not as hard than this spurts and spasms and like I'm working with a couple of clients that are working on rehab projects and have done some wholesaling. And it's really easy when you're a new investor to get really all absorbed in that first project and the marketing slips. And now we're going to be on a roller coaster of feast and famine because the marketing needs to be put in place and it stays there no matter what. And the way to do that is you do it at first so you really understand what's involved. And then eventually you start to budget for the technology that can automate it and hiring VAs to do that grunt and grind work for you. And you train them well and you treat them well. And so let me ask you this, Andrew. What's your rooftop message for other investors? Like, what is the key to success? If you could shake the new investors, all those people that have invested in Fortune Builders or Pace Morby or Carlton Sheets or whatever, who haven't done anything, and you wanted to get their attention and say, hey, look, if you would really just listen to me, this is the key to being successful as a real estate investor. What would your rooftop message be that you would share with the world?
I mean, it changes as we go through time, but the big thing that's sticking out to me now is the consistency and like just do it. Like
Taking action.
I didn't talk to sellers the first 2 years of my business, and here I am, November 21, picking up the phone and talking to Mr. Seller for the first time. I sucked. Like, it was horrible, but over the course of 12 months, I've gotten pretty okay at it. It's still not my favorite thing to do, but I'm building out a system to systematize myself out of that. But you got to do it on a consistent basis. You got to show up every day. You got to
practice it to master it. You've got to take action.
I don't have it readily available
excuses
on my phone, but there's an image that my buddy and I send back and forth to each other, and it's 1.00 raised to the 365. No effort every day equals 1. But if you do 1.01 raised to the 365, that's like 17.7, or no, it's 37.7. So a small, consistent effort on a daily basis has huge returns, and that's really what it's all about.
Small actions over time. You don't have to kill yourself. It's about being consistent. Here's the magic of consistency. It has a cumulative effect and impact. And so that, we want that big vision, but we want to leap to it. We're instant gratification beings. And if it's like doing sit-ups or exercise or a diet, it's like, if you stick to the small, simple steps each and every day over time and you track, you'll be amazed at how much progress you make in a week, in a month. And you're looking back in 6 months and you're like, wow. So
that's what I didn't realize too, is that I kind of went through, preparing for this whole process. And, next week we're closing on another rental property that'll bring us to 25 doors. And I look back, I'm like, wait, we've acquired 25 doors in 25 months. Like, that's how little it took to get to.
Yeah. And it's not like you knew that. It's like you're just realizing that now.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's what consistent action does.
That's pretty much it. Like, consistency outpaces almost anything.
Which leads to, in my coaching business, and my niche is as a strategic business mindset, habits, and accountability coach for real estate investors. It's about helping you treat your real estate investing like a business and approaching it like a business, having the mindset, developing the habits, and getting the support to be consistent and practice it to master it. You've got to take action, no excuses. How am I with excuses, right? No.
I don't even know what it is. What word did you say?
Right. And then you get the results. So if you're struggling and you need a little help, I offer discounts to people to pay up front, but I also do payment plans. And I really work with my clients, and most of my clients are with me for 2 to 3 years. They just keep renewing because they're getting value. And it's not just about getting deals. It's about building a business and building a legacy for generational wealth in your family if you treat it like a business and you get those processes and systems in place and start to leverage technology and other people's time and talent. And that's what you've been so brilliant at, Andrew. And that's why it's been such a joy to work with you, because he gets in his mindset trips where he's like all whiny and bitchy and stuff. And I'll be like, okay, well, let's get this squared away, because I know in 2 hours, you'll have the problem solved. I remember we were on a call once. This was maybe a year ago or a few months ago or something. And he was like, I need I need money. I need to raise some money. I need 70,000. And we were talking about how he was going to do it, how he was going to raise the money. And in like, I think it was an hour later, he texted me,
Yeah.
well, I found the money. And he has always been like that. He's like, he'll be whining and complaining about something. And then I'll listen to him. And then I'm like, all right, let's formulate a plan. And usually in that day, he solves the problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Action.
yeah, that's your superpower, action.
Yeah.
So if you need help, I'm here. We have this podcast, Unstoppable Real Estate Investor Podcast. There's two versions of it every week in my group, the Unstoppable Real Estate Investor Facebook group. And that is on Wednesdays, we interview top 5%ers, which Andrew could have fallen in that podcast on Wednesdays as well as Fridays. And then on Fridays, and that's all top 5%ers, people that are very successful in real estate and they've made a living at it. They've got proof of concept, credibility. They're usually other real estate coaches, marketing, mentors, trainers. And then on Fridays, I'm doing member spotlights, either spotlighting one of my clients or a member in the group. So if that's of interest to you, if you're watching this and you are a top 5%, or you're someone who is, and there's so many creative ways to make money. The traditional ways we talk about are the top three are wholesaling, rehabbing, and buying rentals. But there's a lot of other ways to make money in real estate. Lots of ways, lots of niches, and we'll be interviewing some of those people to show you other ways. Like I've been house hacking, I've developed just rental property from my own initial residence, finished basement, renting that out, another piece of the downstairs, renting that out, and I know people that's been their main way of being a real estate investor is house hacking. People that are only acquiring rentals, people that predominantly do wholesaling, people that are looking to do flips. But there's other things like tax liens and the ultimate solution, buying land and developing. So there's so many ways to make money, and it's finding your niche, the thing that you're gonna groove in, and the thing that it's fun for you. It's the thing that, like Andrew realized early on, nope, I'm not doing the rehabs and flips. That
Don't need to.
sucks. Now, he might have to rehab one of his rentals every now and then, but he's hanging on to it. So anyway, I just want to thank everyone for your interest in the podcast, for being with us. And I want to thank you, Andrew, for
always
just
love doing
being
this
on
kind of
here
stuff.
and sharing all the details of your journey. And this won't be the last time you'll be on here. And I just enjoy working with you. And we have many more years together to we have a project we're working on and we're not ready to share about it yet. Ooh. So eventually we'll be letting the world know about that. But for now, it's a big secret. So anything else you want to say before we wrap up? Andrew?
I'm always down to help. I love crunching numbers and hammering deals and finding creative solutions. I had this deal the other day. We figured out that the seller's best interest was to cash out refinance and then sell the
Yeah, he
property
loves
subject
doing
to.
JVs. If
Like-
you're a less experienced or you're not sure about wholesaling, that confuses a lot of investors. You can reach out to me or Andrew, and Andrew's always willing to,
Yeah,
go into a deal and
I'll
do a
hammer numbers
50-50
all day long.
JV. Yeah.
Help you through the process, really, I mean, that's the way to do it, right? Rising tide lifts all boats, educate and
Yeah.
and
He is
succeed.
not interested in coaching you. He is interested in a JV agreement.
Let's crush
That's why
deals.
he refers
Yes.
clients to me. He doesn't want to get bogged down in the coaching. It's like, look, let's be clear. I'm only going to spend time with you if we're going to do a deal.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to be clear, this isn't free advice for you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Anything else? This is it. This was great. Usually these go about 30 minutes, but when you get someone who's just got a lot of experience and wisdom to share and they're willing to get into the details, we'll go to an hour, and that's what we did today, but we'll usually not go past an hour. So Andrew, thank you so much. It's a joy having you in my life, and it's a joy coaching you and seeing your business being so successful in such a short period of
Thanks.
time.
Yeah, couldn't have done it without
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah. All right, everybody. That's it for this week's podcast, Unstoppable Real Estate Investor Member Spotlight. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.